Brace yourself. Get a blast up anytime now. Collect yourself. Things will never be the same in this sad, sad world.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Humanities class for Thursday, March 26th. The last time we talked, I asked some of you to think about what advice you would give to a friend whose lifestyle is irresponsible or unhealthy as a teenager, but who wishes to be a successful, functioning, happy adult. I've been very happy with the responses that have been coming in, and I want to thank you for the thoughtfulness and compassion and seriousness that you have brought to answering those questions. And I've got to tell you, for those of you who have submitted answers, your friends are lucky to have someone like you in their lives that can be a support to them in the way you've demonstrated in this sort of a practice run for what to do when a friend is struggling. As great as all the answers are, I want to highlight especially something that Riley from 6th period brought up. Riley mentioned developing good habits, and that is very much a key word, a key theme that will be very important for Aristotle in the way that he will answer this question. Our habits are those things that we do over and over and over again. In their most extreme forms, they can become addictions, although good things that we do over and over and over again are also habits. Aristotle's going to say that those habits that we have are like the ingredients or the building blocks that make us who we are. We are made up out of our habits. They take time, they take work to build up. The challenge that we face when we cross over from our teenage years into adulthood is that nothing magic happens the morning you wake up on your 18th birthday, your 21st birthday, 40th birthday. When you face adulthood, all you bring with you is you. And the you that you bring with you is the you that you built over the preceding 18 years out of your habits. The responsibilities and challenges of adulthood call for us to exercise different skills, different powers than we had to exercise as kids or as teenagers. Where do those powers and skills come from? Aristotle says they come from nowhere else other than our habits. So when we wake up on our 18th birthday, our 21st birthday, our 40th birthday, and life is asking different things of us, if we haven't built responsible adult habits as teenagers, we simply do not have the power to do the things that adulthood asks of us. It's not fair that so much is riding on the choices we make and the habits we build when we're young. But it's not fair that there are viruses that make us go into quarantine for weeks and lose all the time we spend with the people we know and love. It's one of the difficult things in life. And the key to being successful, and we'll explore this further with Justine Garter and what he has to say about Aristotle, but the key is going to be to build good habits now. So thank you to all of you, and especially to Riley from 6th period for her answer. Today we're going to continue our look at the life of Aristotle, the second part of our two-part exploration of Aristotle's life. Just like the Tuesday video, today's video is longer, and so there will be no new material for you to go through tomorrow. So you can take today, which is Thursday, and Friday to work through this material. Make sure you take good notes. There will be a quiz over Aristotle's life on Monday. Also starting Monday, we're going to go back to Sophie's World for a while. We'll take that in much more easy to swallow bite-sized pieces than this Life of Aristotle stuff. We'll start to have some fun with ideas again. It will feel less like I've backed a cement truck up to you and just dumped a fat load of cement on your face. So we have that to look forward to next week. For today and tomorrow, let's finish up the life of Aristotle. On Tuesday, we began to look at the life of Aristotle, who was born in 384 BC in the small town of Stagira. His father, Nicomachus, was the personal doctor to King Amyntas III of Macedon. That's the name that I botched in the last video, Amyntas III. Aristotle's father, Nicomachus, died when Aristotle was only 13, and we saw some interesting rumors about Aristotle's wild and crazy teenage years, including even the possibility that he was a drug dealer. He was rescued from this unhealthy lifestyle by Proxenus. Proxenus was a friend of Nicomachus. Proxenus, who Yulie from second period calls her sleep paralysis demon. Proxenus adopted Aristotle and sent him to Athens, to the academy, the school run by Plato. Aristotle was 17 years old at the time, and he will spend 20 years at the academy. That's where we left him Tuesday. Why would somebody spend 20 years at a school? The environment of the academy was about building and practicing philosophy as a lifestyle. A student at the academy does philosophy for a vocation, not in order to graduate. You don't do a set course at the academy and be finished. Instead, a student at the academy practices philosophy as part of his identity. It was an experience of shared community life. You went there because that's what you wanted to do. You didn't go there in order to prepare yourself for something to come down the road. That doesn't mean that nobody ever left, and as we'll see, Aristotle does leave, but not before he spends 20 years in part of this environment of shared learning and knowledge. Aristotle is both at the same time a student of Plato and sharing in the teaching responsibility at the academy. Aristotle believes that everyone must do philosophy, that it's not something that you can escape. Remember, we've said that philosophy is that love of wisdom that motivates us to find true answers to big questions so that we can live and die well. And thinking about it like that, I think it becomes clear how Aristotle is right. Not all of us will be philosophers who devote our entire lives to this passion, this love of wisdom, but everybody does philosophy, and everybody has a philosophy, even if it's not especially clear. And the way Aristotle would prove that point would be by saying that if you argue against the importance of philosophy, if you say something like, philosophy is a waste of time, it's not practical, we should focus on learning how to do actual stuff that will pay the bills. By making that argument, you have appealed to reason. You are seeking to find a wise way to use your limited time, and therefore, by making that argument against the value of philosophy, you are doing philosophy. Aristotle and the other people at the academy were just people who decided to devote their entire lives to doing this important thing that all of us unavoidably, inescapably do all the time. How is Aristotle able to spend 20 years not working at a quote-unquote real job, but studying and learning at the academy? He's able to do it because he is a man of leisure. And he's able to be a man of leisure, a man with nothing but free time, because he comes from a wealthy family. Aristotle is lucky in that he doesn't have to go out and work for a living. He can spend all day, every day, at this leisure activity of learning and teaching without having to worry about who's going to pay the bills. In the ancient world, the hard work was done by people in lower classes, including slaves. And those people would not be included, would not be invited into the kinds of conversations that you and I have in this class. The idea of the equality of all people and of equal access to education is a modern idea, a very good modern idea, mind you. I'm very happy that we don't exclude people who come from poverty, who come from the lower class, from education. If we did, I wouldn't know how to read. I don't come from great wealth like Aristotle did. But that's a modern privilege that we have. It's not something they would have been accustomed to in ancient Greece. Ancient Athens was a democracy, just like our country is a democracy. And of course, democracy is that system of government where instead of one person telling everybody else what to do, like in a monarchy, it's the people themselves who rule. But we do understand there is an important difference between democracy in Athens and our own democracy, and it's that not everybody gets a seat at the table in Athenian democracy. In Athens, you have slavery, and the slaves are not voting. Women are not voting. And foreigners who may live in Athens but not be from Athens are not allowed to vote. The word for foreigners in Athens is medics, M-E-T-I-C-S. Now, a medic is not just somebody who travels from an incredibly long distance and moves to Athens. Anybody from outside the city is a medic and is considered a foreigner and is a second-class member of society. Immigrants to Athens do not have the same rights as natural-born citizens of the city of Athens. Sort of the cruel, and we use the word xenophobic, which is the fear of people who are different, that the cruel and xenophobic anti-immigrant sentiment that you hear about in the news and that many of you have probably experienced firsthand in different times of your life is not something new. It's not something limited to the United States, not something limited to our time. these same feelings of fear of people who are different, and that being translated into anger at people who are different, existed in Athens. Why does fear get transformed to anger? Why are people who are afraid showing themselves to be angry? It's because anger is easier to deal with than fear. So rather than live out my fear, I internally translate that into anger. And that is what a metic, M-E-T-I-C, metic or foreigner would experience while living in Athens. Aristotle himself, coming from Stagira, is a metic in Athens, does not have the same rights as the people who were born in Athens. Aristotle could not vote and could not own property in Athens. Sometimes I think about how many of us in our school community are immigrants, or your parents were immigrants, or otherwise you or your parents are new to the mainland from Puerto Rico, which is part of the United States. And I think about how anti-immigrant thoughts and words are sort of in the air in the United States these days. And it breaks my heart to think that any of that might actually soak into the way you think about yourself, the way you view yourself. And my goodness, I sure hope that that never happens, that you let that roll right off of you and understand that people who are cruel and angry in the way they speak about people who are from where you are from, that is a them problem. That is not a you problem. Aristotle proves that, because Aristotle put up with the same garbage. Aristotle was unwelcome by virtue of the fact that he was a foreigner, and yet Aristotle is the best thing that ever happened to Athens, just as you all have the potential, no matter where you're from, to be the best thing that ever happened to this country. And I'm glad you're here with us, and anybody who isn't, don't listen to him. The same time that Aristotle is doing his work at the academy, Philip, the king of Macedon, is doing his work to conquer most of Greece. He is the master of nearly all of Greece by 338 BC, and that includes Athens. I'd just like you to think for a second, how do you think you would feel about this king from the north coming in and taking over if you're Aristotle? For the citizens of Athens, this is big-time bad news. They're used to controlling their own daily life, controlling their own destiny. They have a democracy. They're not going to like somebody from the outside coming in and saying, now you do what I say or you die. But if you're Aristotle and you're a metic and you've been in Athens all these years but are still not considered one of us, you hear people crying about how our democracy is going away, you might think, what democracy? There's no democracy for me. I don't get a vote. I'm one of many people in this city who are considered second class, who are considered less than the rest of you. So I see this outsider from Macedon come in, and maybe I'm pretty okay with that, especially considering that Aristotle's political connections were to Philip's family. Philip's father is Amyntas III. Aristotle's father was Amyntas Doctor. So Aristotle is going to be closer to the conquering forces of Macedon than many others in Athens. And that's going to get him into trouble pretty soon. Anytime I'm tempted to feel good about myself and the work that I do, I think about how much Aristotle accomplished. Aristotle's professional life, he wasn't just focused on one area. Aristotle became an expert on an incredible number of disciplines. Remember that a discipline is a subject that you study or teach. Aristotle studied and taught metaphysics. Metaphysics is the philosophy of what it means to be. It's the most basic level of reality. That's what Plato was doing with his theory of forms. The theory of forms is a type of metaphysics. Plato says this is how reality is. This is going to be the area where Aristotle is the most different from Plato. Where Plato is pointing you up in the sky to this other realm, the world of forms, Aristotle is much more grounded on the earth. And he's going to say, the world around you is real. That's what we can know, and that's what we should study. Those are two conflicting types of metaphysics. And that would be enough to last any normal person's lifetime. But Aristotle didn't just do metaphysics. Aristotle studied and taught about ethics, which is the philosophy that looks at how we act, what is good, what is evil, how do we treat one another. Aristotle studied and taught politics. How do we organize our societies? What does a good society look like? What does a good government look like? Then he studied biology. He spent years collecting samples of animals, doing experiments, learning how bodies worked, cutting dead animals open and see how they're put together. His work in biology will not be matched. His ideas will not be improved upon for centuries and centuries and centuries until the invention of the microscope. He studies and teaches medicine. He got an early start on that from his father, and at least by rumor, from some of his wild teenage journey. Poetics, when he's not busy talking about what a good king should be like, or cutting open an antelope to see how its liver works, he is exploring what poetry is and how it works. The same with drama and comedy. He's not writing comedy. Aristotle, whatever else can be said about all 2,500 pages of his that exist, they're not funny. But instead he explores how comedy works, what it means to be funny. Aristotle does work that today we would call psychology. How does the mind work? Astronomy. How do the stars work? How do the heavens work? Video game design. Okay, that one I made up. So no video game design for Aristotle. And so much more. He did an incredible number of things in his work. The head of the academy and Aristotle's longtime teacher and friend, Plato, dies in 384 BC. Aristotle, as Plato's number one student, as the most skilled and gifted person at the academy, and probably the most skilled and gifted person anywhere at any time, Aristotle seems like the perfect choice to take Plato's place, to take over and lead the academy now that Plato's gone. But instead, the job goes to Plato's nephew, Spoulippus. Spoulippus, nephew of Plato, becomes head of the academy after Plato's death. Aristotle's response is, I'm out of here. Aristotle leaves the academy. He leaves Athens after 20 years, when he is passed over and not given leadership at the academy. Aristotle's first move after Athens is to the city of Assus. Yes, that is its real name. While at Assus, he works as an advisor to Hermias, who is, I just have to say this because that's what he is the king of Assus. While there, Aristotle marries Hermias' adopted daughter, Pythias. Pythias was one of those rare, highly educated women in ancient Greece. She herself did a lot of work in science, especially biology. They have a daughter who is also named Pythias. Sometimes they're distinguished Pythias the elder and Pythias the younger. Both Aristotle's wife and then even more tragically Aristotle's daughter both die while Aristotle is still alive. Aristotle doesn't remarry, but he has a long-term relationship after Pythias' death with a woman named Hypatia. He seems to have a great deal of respect for Hypatia, though Hypatia is a slave. They have a son. The son's name is Nicomachus. That's not uncommon even in our own day to name your child after your father. So Nicomachus was Aristotle's father and was also the name of Aristotle's son. Aristotle leaves Assus and goes to the island of Lesbos. There he sets up shop and he focuses primarily on biological research. Until he gets a call from King Philip. King Philip says, I have a 13-year-old son. I want my 13-year-old son to get a good education so that he will be a good king when he takes over from me. We have already met that son. His name is Alexander. Aristotle becomes Alexander's personal tutor for several years. Alexander, we know, will go on to conquer the largest empire up to that time and be known by history as Alexander the Great. When he finishes teaching Alexander, Aristotle returns to Athens. While at Athens, he founds his own school, a rival to the academy. Aristotle's new school in Athens is called the Lyceum. The Lyceum. It would be like if they told me I couldn't teach the classes that I wanted here at Four Corners, so I go across the street and open up Five Corners, start my own school. That's what Aristotle does. Meanwhile, over in Babylon, in the midst of conquering the world, Alexander the Great dies in the year 323 BC at the age of 32. This puts Aristotle in a real bind. Aristotle is closely connected to the royal family of Macedon. The royal family of Macedon has conquered Greece, a lot of other stuff too, but importantly it's conquered Greece, including Athens. Now Alexander's dead, and the people who are associated with him are looked on with great suspicion. Athens charges Aristotle with impiety, that is, not supporting the worship of the traditional gods, religious false teaching as they understood it. Athens charges Aristotle with impiety and corrupting the youth. If that sounds familiar, those are the same charges that were brought up against Socrates 2 generations earlier. Socrates faced those charges, defended himself, and then allowed himself to be put to death, because for him, his mission was more important than his life. Aristotle looked at things a little differently. When Aristotle heard that these charges were leveled against him, he packed up and left Athens. He's quoted as saying, "I shall not allow Athens to sin against philosophy twice." There he's clearly making a reference to the execution of Socrates. It's like, y'all killed Socrates, you're not going to kill me. He actually goes and he leaves Athens and stays on an estate that belonged to his mother, stays there for a year, and then dies in 322. We saw that Aristotle, despite being one of the most famous and most important people ever to live, did not enjoy equal rights with the citizens of Athens because he was a metic, M-E-T-I-C, or a foreigner. And Athenian law did not recognize the equality of foreigners. So Aristotle's accomplishments were made despite being treated like a second-class member of his society. That's what I'd like us to focus on today. So I have a new, or really the second half to the previous optional assignment. I'd like you to comment in 4 to 6 sentences on today's main Edmodo post, answering either one of these questions. First one is, I'd like you to tell me about a time that you were treated as a second-class part of society. How did you react? And what lesson have you learned from that? Not everybody's going to feel comfortable sharing a personal story like that, and that's okay. If you do, you can answer that question. If not, there's an alternative question. And that question is, are there people in our community? And by community, we could talk about our school, or by community, we could talk about our country, the United States. You choose what you want to talk about. But are there people in our community who are still treated as second-class members of society? Who are they, and how can we work to include them equally? Answer either of those questions in 4 to 6 sentences as a comment on today's main Edmodo post, the post where you got the link for this video. You don't have to do that. If you do, if you answer that question and the one from the previous video, both by 11:59 p.m. Friday evening, March 27th, you will be exempted from our upcoming quiz. The quiz will be posted on Monday, if not before, and will be due on Wednesday. So you won't get a chance to look at the quiz, see if you feel like taking it, and then go back and answer these questions. If you choose to engage in this more conversational assignment, post your answers to those questions by 11:59 p.m. Friday. Otherwise, we have a quiz on the life of Aristotle on Monday. Have a great weekend, and I will talk to you next time.
Around a lot of it, trying to make the pieces fit to a puzzle with a million missing pieces. When I'm feeling fine is when I discover that I'm afraid to blow my cover, and there's something very wrong with this. So sit back in your hole, or get back in your cave. If I'm going down, I'm taking someone with me.